The United Nations has warned that the Central African Republic is at risk of spiralling into genocide and that the government there is unable to stop armed groups. The UN Security Council has also heard that Islamist militants are gaining strength and that in turn this is creating more tensions between Christians and Muslims. Well, the country has been virtually lawless since rebels seized the capital Bangui and ousted the President Bozize in March. Stability in the Central African Republic is crucial because it's surrounded by some already volatile countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad and South Sudan and Sudan. The country gained independence from France in 1960, but it's been subject to a series of coups since then, the most recent in March, when rebels from the Seleka coalition seized power. Claims of atrocities have quickly emerged and hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced. And groups are now calling for urgent help. And the UN chief Ban Ki-moon has said there has been a total breakdown in law and order there. Well, for the past 2 months, the town of Bosangoa has been at the crossroads of the violence between the two communities. And our team has gained rare access to the Central African Republic from where Leila Ajovi reports.
The church for a sanctuary. In Bosangoa, over 35,000 Christians have sought refuge in the Catholic mission after their homes were attacked by a loose alliance of former rebels known as Seleka. This is a community under siege. And as hard as life is in the camp, people are too afraid to leave, even when their homes are just down the road. Nina's brother tried to go to town this morning. She has just been told he was beaten and shot dead. This story, however, has a happy ending. Her brother was eventually found, badly beaten but alive. And for many of the men who venture out of the camp, the risk of being detained, beaten or worse is high. Vianney dares to go home whenever he can. There's nothing left after all the furniture was stolen. And since his brother, a soldier for the former regime, was killed, he says both Seleka and Muslims are now the enemy.
I want to study to not lose my chances in life. All of this is nothing. My studies can take me somewhere. But for now, I want revenge. This is what I want.
On the other side of town, the Imam preaches peace. His is also a community living in fear. The suffering, he says, is on both sides, and many hundreds have died, mostly civilians. Khadija, the wife of a cattle herder, was shot in the neck and left for dead when her village was attacked in early September by Christian militia. She's the sole survivor of her family. She tells me that when she regained consciousness, she found the bodies of her father, husband and children lying dead around her. An African peacekeeping force has deployed in Bosangoa to prevent further violence. But with limited resources and too few men, they may not be able to protect the population for long. What started as a political rebellion is now threatening to turn into a full-scale religious conflict. In the vicious circle of attacks and reprisals, the humanitarian situation continues to worsen. The new government has yet to make a plan to end the violence and take concrete measures towards reconciliation.
Well, that was Leila Ajovi there with a special report from inside the Central African Republic. And I've been joined here in the studio by Catherine Teyer. She's the founder and president of the charity organisation Siwa Europe, which aims to promote education for children in the Central African Republic. She's a member of the diaspora here. And also in the studio is Mamadou Moussa Ba. He's BBC Africa analyst, and he was in the CAR earlier this year. Catherine, so first of all, I know you're in contact with your family. They are in the capital, Bangui. But just give us an idea about the kind of things that you're hearing from people inside the country.
Well, first of all, I will have to say that a lot of my family members had to leave the country. They've fled because of the violence and everything that was happening, especially for the young children in my family. Their parents decided to take them away. But for those who have stayed in the country, they just basically live in fear. And because of the instability and the uncertainty about the future, they really don't know what is going to happen. So I would say that they're not really happy to be there, but they don't really have the choice.
What kind of violence are you talking about here?
Well, as everyone knows, people are being killed on a daily basis. People are being looted. Women are being raped. So this is a very serious situation. And everyone can be the victim of these rebel groups.
Mamadou, I mean, I said at the outset that the UN has been warning of a possible spiral into genocide. That's not a word to use lightly. And it was actually Adama Dieng, the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, who said this in New York to the UN. And he says, my feeling is that this will end with Christian communities, Muslim communities killing one another, which means that if we don't act now and decisively, I will not exclude the possibility of a genocide occurring. I mean, what lies behind that?
Well, I think we must be a bit careful in the way we use the terms. But if you look at the whole picture, I mean, and remember what happened a few years ago in Rwanda, it's a bit similar. I'm not saying that it's leading to genocide, but the threat is great. People starting to buy machetes, all sorts of weapons, killing each other. I mean, if the international community doesn't act, it can lead to this kind of situation.
So when he talks about Christian and Muslim communities, I mean, give us a breakdown. It's a majority of people in the Central African Republic are Christian. It's about, what, 55%?
Well, the vast majority of the population are Christian. They're living in the south of the country. We would say around 55%. And the north of the country, the border between CAR and Sudan is majority of Muslim people living there, and within the Seleko rebels there are also Janjaweed, Arab militias, and it's a mix of...
Because it is in a very volatile part of Africa, isn't it, where lots of people coming in from across the borders. But Catherine, what is behind this burgeoning hatred that everybody says must stop between these two communities, because they have coexisted in the past?
They have coexisted for many, many years. They didn't used to be any problem in terms of religion and faith. So this is something new, I think, compared to the previous coup d'etat. I think this is something that hasn't happened before. Everyone was living in peace and everyone was getting on well.
So what lies behind? I mean, we know that President Francois Bozizé was removed from power in March and he's now in exile in France. But what is behind the animosity?
I think there are different reasons behind this conflict. First of all, the people, the rebels, were just fed up with the government, They had agreements in place and the previous president was not respecting the agreement. But also you need to think about people living in poverty, because at the end of the day, even though some rebels came to help the current president take power, a lot of other people were not involved in the first place, decided to join. So we don't really know what is the rationale behind all this. And I think that everyone is defending their own interests.
Sure.
So it's a mix of interests.
Mamadou, so what can the international community do? The French have troops already in Bangui. It's a former French colony, of course. Could they send in more people, African Union, UN, or what?
Well, I think there are a number of actions that needs to be taken to save the country from chaos. First of all, I think the international community should increase the number of troops there, and they should ensure that there is a disarmament of all these militia, be it Seleko rebels or all the people who are coming from neighboring countries, I mean, to exploit the chaos in this country. But fundamentally, I think the organization of free and fair election is important, because the country needs to have, legitimate leaders. The current president came to power using force. This is the same situation when Francois Bozizé came to power in 2003. I think
But troops will have to go in. The French, perhaps, like they did in Mali or in the past in Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah, I think this is what France is trying to do, sending additional troops. They have, at the moment, 400 troops controlling the airport, and in the pipeline, there are other troops that they intend to send to CAR.
OK, Mamadou, thanks. BBC Africa analyst, and Catherine Teo from the CAR diaspora here in London. Thank you both very much indeed, and I wish your family and everybody else safe. Thank you. Now let's take a look at some of the day's other news.